on the record. Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Kelleher. I am a lawyer with the Siting Division of the Department of Public Utilities, which serves as staff for the Energy Facilities Siting Board, which I will refer to as the Siting Board or EFSB. Welcome to today's hybrid public comment hearing regarding the proposed regulation 980 CMR 15.00 entitled Cumulative Impact Analysis and Standards for Applying Site Suitability Report Criteria. I will refer to this proposed regulation as the CIA regulation. This proposed regulation is the subject of the rulemaking docket EFSB 25-10-A, which the Siting Board opened on December 19, 2025, pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 2. The CIA regulation is one of several regulations the Siting Board is promulgating to implement the siting and permitting provisions of the 2024 Climate Act, which is Chapter 239 of the Acts of 2024. Before we continue further, I will ask the interpreters to provide instructions on using today's interpretation services beginning in English. Mr. Lee, please.
Thank you. The language announcement will now begin. We are providing interpretation services for this meeting in Spanish, Portuguese, Chinese, Vietnamese, and Haitian Creole, as well as American Sign Language. Whether you are here or on Zoom, you will have access to interpretation services provided today. If you are here in the room, you can access interpretation using a receiver and headphone set. They are available at the table at the side of the room. For those on Zoom, in just a moment, we will activate the interpretation. You will see a globe icon button that says Interpretation. Click the globe and make a selection for your preferred language, including English. Now for Spanish, please.
Ofrecemos servicios de interpretación para esta reunión en español, portugués, chino, vietnamita y criollo haitiano, así como en lenguas de signos americana. Tanto si está aquí como si participa a través de Zoom, tendrá acceso a los servicios de interpretación que se ofrecen hoy. Si está aquí en la sala, puede acceder a interpretación utilizando un receptor y unos auriculares. Están disponibles en la mesa situada al lado de la sala. Para aquellos que estén en Zoom, en unos momentos activaremos la interpretación. Verán un botón con el icono de un globo terráqueo que dice Interpretación. Hagan clic en el globo terráqueo y seleccionen su idioma preferido, incluido el inglés. Muchas gracias.
And for Portuguese, please.
Estamos oferecendo serviços de interpretação para esta reunião em espanhol, português, chinês, vietnamita e crioulo haitiano, bem como em língua de sinais americana. Se você estiver aqui no Zoom, terá acesso aos serviços de interpretação oferecidos hoje. Se você estiver aqui na sala, você pode acessar a interpretação usando um receptor e fones de ouvido. Eles estão disponíveis na mesa ao lado da sala. Para aqueles que estão no Zoom, em instantes ativaremos a interpretação. Você verá o botão com o ícone de um globo que diz Interpretação. Clique no globo e selecione o idioma de sua preferência, incluindo o inglês. Interpretation complete.
Thank you. For Mandarin, please.
我们将为本次会议提供西班牙语、葡萄牙语、中文、越南语、海地克里奥尔语以及美国手语的口译服务。无论您是在现场参会还是通过 Zoom 线上参会，今天都可以使用口译服务。现场参会的与会者，您可以使用接收器和耳机收听口译，设备放置在会场一侧的桌子上。通过 Zoom 参会的与会者，稍后我们将开启口译功能，届时您会看到一个写有 Interpretation 的地球图标，点击该图标即可选择您需要的语言，包括英语。谢谢。Thank you.
And for Vietnamese, please.
Xin chào quý vị, chúng tôi cung cấp dịch vụ phiên dịch cho buổi hôm nay bằng tiếng Tây Ban Nha, Bồ Đào Nha, Trung Quốc, Việt Nam và Creole Haiti, cũng như ngôn ngữ ký hiệu Mỹ. Dù quý vị có mặt trực tiếp hay tham gia qua Zoom, quý vị đều có thể sử dụng dịch vụ phiên dịch được cung cấp hôm nay. Nếu đang có mặt trực tiếp, quý vị có thể sử dụng thiết bị thu và tai nghe, chúng được đặt trên bàn bên cạnh phòng. Đối với những người tham gia qua Zoom, chúng tôi sẽ kích hoạt chức năng phiên dịch trong giây lát. Quý vị sẽ thấy biểu tượng hình quả địa cầu có chữ phiên dịch. Hãy nhấp vào biểu tượng quả địa cầu và chọn ngôn ngữ của mình hoặc kênh tiếng Anh. Xin cảm ơn.
And for Haitian Creole, please.
Bonjour tout le monde, et nous gagnons service interprétation disponible dans la réunion dans la langue sayo qui c'est espagnol, portugais, chinois, vietnamien, créole haïtien, ensemble avec langue enseigne américain. Si vous êtes là dans la salle là, ou soit sous Zoom là, vous avez besoin accès à service interprétation nous offre aujourd'hui. Et si que vous êtes là dans la salle là, vous avez besoin de service accès ensemble avec interprétation, vous utilisez un récepteur ensemble avec un casque écouteur. Appareil électronique ça est disponible sous table l'autre bord à bord salle là. Et pour les gens qui sont Zoom yo, dans un petit moment nous pourrons activer service interprétation pour. Vous pouvez remarquer un petit bouton icône globe qui dit interprétation. Cliquez sur globe là et puis sélectionnez langue préférée là qui c'est créole haïtien et puis vous avez option pour choisir anglais tout si vous préférez. Merci un peu tout le monde.
Language announcement complete. Thank you.
Thank you, interpreters.
Thank
for that
you.
explanation.
Let me turn the interpretation on now, and please make your selection, including to English. One moment. Ready.
All good. Zoom also provides translated closed captions. To activate this feature, press the Show Captions button at the bottom of your screen, then press the up arrow and select My Caption Language, and then the specific language you want. This hybrid public comment hearing is being live streamed and is also being recorded for the Siting Board's YouTube channel. We have a stenographer at this public comment hearing who is transcribing the official record of this hearing. Anybody speaking today needs to speak slowly and clearly to enable the stenographer to accurately capture your words. If you are having technical difficulty with Zoom, please text or call 857-200-0065. With me this afternoon are Jeremy McDermott, Chair of the Department of Public Utilities and member of the Siting Board, Stacy Rubin, Commissioner of the Department of Public Utilities and also a member of the Siting Board, Andrew Green to my left, Director of the Siting Division, Joan Foster Evans to my right, General Counsel of the Siting Board, and Tim Riley, all the way to my left, Senior Analyst with the Siting Division. Also in attendance are representatives from the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs and Massachusetts Office of Environmental Justice and Equity. The Siting Board formally opened the rulemaking process for the CIA regulation on December 19, 2025, by issuing a decision and filing the proposed regulation with the Secretary of State's office. The decision by the board included a notice for this hearing. The public comment period extends from January 23, 2026 until February 13, 2026. Today's public comment hearing is part of the public comment process. The primary purposes of today's public comment hearing are to present to the public the proposed CIA regulation and to receive comments from the public about the proposed regulation. Once the comment period closes on February 13, the Siting Board staff will review the comments and revise the proposed regulation. The board will meet again later in the winter and again in the spring to vote on the final regulation. Chair McDermott and Commissioner Rubin will make opening remarks now about the CIA and SSR regulation. Chair McDermott.
Great. Thank you, Daniel, and good afternoon, folks. As Daniel mentioned, I am Jeremy McDermott, the chair of the DPU and a member of the siting board. Want to welcome you in the room and online for coming today, and thank you for taking some time to participate in this public hearing. Today, we're here to listen to your comments about the draft regulation that the board issued in December, and we're looking forward to taking additional comments in writing by the deadline on February 13th. The cumulative impact and site suitability regulations are part of a set of new rules designed to improve the process for permitting energy facilities across the Commonwealth and improving that for all stakeholders. We know that we will need new energy infrastructure in the future, and we also know that we need to make sure that these facilities are sited and permitted thoughtfully with input from and consideration of those impacted by these decisions. You may recall that at our December board meeting, Secretary Tepper requested an additional case study on how to show cumulative impact analysis and site suitability pieces and how they fit together for a real-world project. This is a chance for me to give a shout out to the siting division team that has done an amazing job working that case study up and actually, doing a Herculean task, getting all these projects through the process and through moving these regulations forward for a very significant change to the way that the Commonwealth does permitting and siting. As part of that, they're going to present a case study about how these two pieces are going to fit together. And we're hopeful and optimistic that this will help illuminate and demystify the process and will give you all a sense of how the development process will work. I want to underscore that this regulation is a very important component to the new and improved siting and permitting process, and it will be used both for clean energy projects, but also for proposed fossil fuel infrastructure in the future. We know that these two pieces, cumulative impact analysis and site suitability, have been very highly anticipated pieces of the overall implementation of the bill, and that many of stakeholders have a keen interest in ensuring that it works well. I think we're getting to a good place and really look forward to hearing from all of you today. And with that, I will turn it to my colleague, Commissioner Rubin.
Thank you very much, Chair McDermott. I am really grateful to everyone who has made time to be with us today, both in person and on Zoom. Again, my name is Stacy Rubin, and I'm a commissioner at the DPU and also currently a member of the Energy Facility Siting Board. And I just want to reiterate for those who still don't understand the distinction between the DPU and the Energy Facility Siting Board, that the Siting Board is independent of the Department of Public Utilities. However, the siting division of the DPU provides staffing both to the DPU Commission as well as to the Siting Board. I have also been the DPU commissioner working very closely with our siting division since the passage, and actually before the passage of the 2024 Climate Act, and have been working on these provisions. I am enthusiastic about integrating cumulative impact analysis and site suitability reports into the review of energy infrastructure. Understanding and accounting for cumulative impact is essential to making equitable decisions about energy infrastructure that assess population vulnerabilities and public health impacts. Rather than evaluating a proposed project in isolation, a cumulative impacts framework understands how multiple environmental and social indicators interact and build over time in a given area. Cumulative impacts are the compounding effects resulting from exposures to multiple stressors experienced by a person or a community. These cumulative impacts are focused on historical burdens of industrial and commercial activities and those effects on people. Cumulative impacts are not necessarily looking into the effects on the environment. For too long, energy infrastructure in Massachusetts was frequently cited in communities of color, limited English proficient neighborhoods, and low-income communities that hosted other polluting infrastructure, all of which impact human health. The cumulative impact analysis regulations are aimed at acknowledging those historical burdened areas and also about understanding how a proposed project, whether it's fossil fuel infrastructure or clean energy infrastructure, will impact the surrounding residents and workers. Cumulative burdens have direct implications for public health, as communities that are facing multiple overlapping indicators tend to experience higher rates of chronic disease, lower life expectancy, and greater vulnerability to environmental hazards. Incorporating this cumulative impact considerations into energy planning and permitting is therefore a critical strategy for protecting human health and reflects the Commonwealth's priority of ensuring that state agencies meaningfully address the long-standing and interconnected inequities concerning environmental exposure and infrastructure development. The goal is to ensure that any energy infrastructure development does not create disproportionate adverse effects in already burdened areas. We have heard from commenters at past siting board meetings and in earlier stakeholder sessions that the cumulative impact analysis frameworks needs to do a better job looking at impacts to the environment. I think the proposed regulations appropriately focus cumulative impacts on the impacts to people. There are other components of siting board review that consider impacts to the environment, ecology, and wildlife habitat. Those additional components include the site suitability report, which will review siting impacts of clean energy infrastructure, site and route scoring, and other components of the siting board's review consider issues like tree removal, for example. I want to thank the Siting Division for its wonderful work preparing an updated case study that we will discuss at the public hearing. And again, thank you to the many stakeholders who have been working very closely with us to help us shape the critical components of the regulations that we are discussing today. And now I will turn it back to Presiding Officer Kelleher.
Thank you, Commissioner Rubin. Mr. Riley and Mr. Green, would you like to present now the CIA regulation?
Hello, everybody. I'm Tim Riley. Siting Division Department. So what we'd like to do, next slide, Brian. We'd like to demonstrate the steps of the CIA and site suitability process, how they're complementary and integrated, and to describe the nature of the reporting, as well as provide the case study example. In this case, it's a battery energy storage system, a clean energy storage system. That we think that will provide a lot of understanding of the context of CIA and site suitability, as well as demonstrate the ease of use of this. I think these tools are really quite easy to use, and I think will be very helpful for permitting. And then finally, we like to solicit input from the stakeholders and the public regarding the draft regulation. Next slide, please. So the first bullet here describes what a cumulative impact is, and I'll let you read that. The CIA and site suitability processes rely on a number of tools, and we're going to talk about those tools. One of which is the Mass EnviroScreen tool, which was developed by the Office of Environmental Justice and Equity, which also, by the way, developed the guidelines that the EFSB used to develop regulations for site suitability. And what we want to do is we want to, vis-a-vis the CIA, look at those areas that are already stressed and understand if the project itself exhibits a material exacerbation of the condition of the area with respect to public health or social vulnerabilities, environmental and climate risks. And then if in fact the project does materially exacerbate the impacts, then we look to conduct or the applicant will propose remedial actions, which will seek to avoid, minimize, or mitigate those impacts. Next slide, please. This is a summary of the CIA process, and we're going to go through this in some detail. I think it's important to understand that the applicant is responsible for conducting the CIA and the site suitability assessment as required in the draft regs and for reporting those results for board review. This is done basically during the pre-filing stage. Next slide, please. So I referred earlier to this Mass EnviroScreen product. It's a GIS-based product that was developed by the Office of Environmental Equity, Justice and Equity. It's a statewide tool to identify basically burdened communities that have the greatest environmental burdens and social vulnerabilities. It's conducted by census block group. And those are small, relatively small blocks developed by the census, the U.S. Census. And we look at whether there are elevated levels of adverse environmental, social, climate, or public health impacts. There are about 30 indicators in those areas, and we're going to talk about those. And I think, again, we'll look at this, but the tool is easy to use, it's quick, and it supports a consistent data-driven approach to understanding cumulative impacts in the Commonwealth. Next slide, please. This is a slide we've shown before. I think many of you have seen it, but basically this is, though it's relatively hard to read, these are the 30 indicators that are part of Mass EnviroScreen. And there are a couple of different, and we'll just sort of talk about sort of the organization of this. There are two major categories. One is pollution and climate burdens, and the other one is population characteristics. And the pollution and climate burdens look at things like environmental exposure and the different types of pollution that people are exposed to, as well as environmental effects, which are really the locations of chemicals, toxic chemicals relative to communities. And finally, it also looks at climate risk. So things like drought, wildfire, extreme precipitation, extreme heat. The other major category is more of a human characteristic, population characteristic category. We look at things like sensitive populations that measure the number of people in a community who may be severely affected by pollution or climate hazards, and socioeconomic factors. So these are kind of the stresses on communities that make people less vulnerable or less, more sensitive rather to pollution effects. So we have these various categories, and we use these then, and the GIS tool is excellent at then characterizing each census block with respect to these 30 indicators. Next slide, please. These are specific geographical areas. Now, the 2024 Act, and basically a specific geographical area, or SGA, is a buffer around the outer boundary of a facility. And the 2024 Act didn't really define what that. They said they called for specific geographical areas, but they didn't define what they are. And so the regulation does define that, and it defines it by basically type of facility. And what these numbers that you see are radial distances from the outer facility boundary, basically that covers the so-called buffer area that we have to look at, areas of impact within these buffer areas, especially with respects to burdened areas, which we'll discuss here in a moment. Next slide, please. So the CIA report has specific contents according to the regulation, and these are the contents which you can look at. We've developed a template that basically organizes all these types of information to a specific template. So it makes it easier then to fill out and to make sure that we've covered all our bases and what's required in the law. The applicant produces the report and describes it, thereby describing the analysis. The template closely follows the CIA steps as discussed in the regulation and includes also, importantly, community input gathered during the pre-filing process. And I think what's important here too is that if in fact, through some threshold analysis that we're going to get to here in a moment, if in fact there are not so-called burdened areas within the specific geographical area, then the report sort of stops, the analysis, the CIA analysis stops there. However, if there are burdened areas within the analysis, then the CIA report is, CIA analysis continues on and is reflected in the report. Next slide, please. The board has a regulatorily mandated requirement for assessing CIA and site suitability reports. For example, the EFSB is charged with basically assessing whether the applicant conducted a comprehensive CIA and suitability analysis which followed the regulation. So did in fact the CIA and the site suitability analysis follow the regulations? Did the applicant, if there were in fact impacts, disproportionate impacts, adverse effects, did they incorporate the mitigation hierarchy? And also, did they take into account and consider a community benefit plan or a community benefit agreement? If the applicant developed a community benefit plan or agreement, then the board will take that into account. However, if the applicant did not develop a community benefit agreement or plan, then the board will consider if there are additional remedial actions that are required to address disproportionate adverse effects. Next slide, please. There are some other considerations that are important, and Commissioner Rubin touched on these actually in her initial remarks. One are natural and other resource considerations, and I think it's really important from a context basis, and this is reflected in a lot of the comments we received too on the draft the initial draft regulation, that CIA and site suitability are really only two tools in a much larger framework of tools that may be used by the board to evaluate a project. And in fact, that second sub-bullet is really important, I think, on there, that basically nothing limits the board from considering other project impacts such as ecological, historical, archaeological resources, tree canopy cover, constructability, etc., including outside the specific geographical area and outside of burdened areas. So it's important. That's a really important concept because it basically says if there are impacts from this project and they are somewhere, outside this SGA, the applicant it's incumbent upon the applicant to consider it, and it's incumbent upon the board to also consider it. And the other piece that I think is important, these are kind of reflective of comments we received. The CIA really focuses on normal facility operations. It doesn't focus on emergency operations. That is also considered by the board vis-a-vis the emergency response plans and other associated materials that basically demonstrate that the applicant has seriously considered what happens and how to mitigate impacts from an emergency. However, the CIA does, through the specific geographical area in certain cases, does contemplate things like plumes and stuff by establishing, for example, in batteries, SGA, a buffer area of 1 mile. A normal operation of a battery facility would not impact, outside of 1 mile, but a plume might if there was a fire. So that's why some of the SGAs are as they are. Next slide, please. Okay, so now let's talk about site suitability. Each criterion is scored on a scale from 0 to 5, where 0 is a highly suitable location and higher scores are less suitable. And higher scores may require impact minimization and mitigation. Next slide, please. So to do this, kind of like we had for mass EnviroScreen as a tool, we also have now an excellent site suitability mapping tool, which is easy to use and quick. And it's an interactive GIS tool that basically helps you score the 5 site suitability criteria. And we're going to have a demonstration of that here, or at least outputs of that here in a moment. But basically, just very quickly, the 5 criteria are under site suitability are climate change resilience, which is coastal storm surge or riverine flooding. And the way that comes about, that analysis comes about is by using the RMAT, the state RMAT tool. Then there's also carbon storage and sequestration. And that's basically what is the ability of the environment and soils, for example, to absorb CO2 or other greenhouse gases over the next 50 years. Is there a good ability to absorb gases, or is there not a good ability to absorb gases? And it's an important consideration. The third criteria is biodiversity, and this is a integrated biodiversity index, basically of a number of things that we'll talk about here in a moment, that's mapped on a 30-meter grid, and we calculate sort of the biodiversity of an area. We'll give you an example of that here in a moment. Next slide, please. We also have agricultural resources, and this is a way of looking at what are the agricultural resources in an area, and soils and agriculture designations. Finally, as the 5th criteria, social environmental burdens, and we use the mass EnviroScreen tool for this as well. This gives us an idea of the social environmental burdens in the area. We also have a concept of what we call criteria score modifiers. And this is a way of affecting, based on some specifics of the area, the site suitability score. For example, we have development potential. And what that is if basically the development is in a brownfield, an old hazardous waste site, or something, then basically we assign a score of 0 because it's a nice brownfield reuse of the site. However, if the site is within like an Article 97 or other protected area, then we have a very high score, which means it's not suitable. And so that's for environmental. For some of the social benefits, we also can reduce scores if the project shows that it improves environmental justice and equity considerations, such as reducing historic harms, reducing environmental burdens, things like that. It results in workforce creation or economic development, and it facilitates infrastructure and community support. So that kind of chucks away and reduces the site suitability score if it shows that there are certain benefits, environmental or social benefits. Importantly, though, score modification only occurs with mutual agreement between the applicant and the local government. So there has to be a kind of accordance between the government, local government, and the applicant. Next slide, please. So this is site suitability report implementation and what the board looks at. Basically, the applicants use the site suitability mapping tool to derive the criteria-specific scores. And then they analyze those, interpret those. We're going to talk about how that happens in a minute. Vis-a-vis a site suitability report for a consolidated permit application or a consolidated state application. So basically, a site suitability report is produced for the board to consider, or the local government, as it were. And again, site suitability reports and CIA reports are only 2 of many information sources. This is not all that an applicant does. Next slide. The CIA, as designed, CIAs and site suitability analyses are very complementary. They look at different different kinds of parameters. For example, site suitability looks at land use, ecological and agricultural considerations, and social environmental burdens, whereas CI really largely addresses pollution, public health, and climate risks. Next slide. So, and I think what's the real benefit of this is that what the regulation does is it formalizes and institutionalizes this expanded considerations. And so it sort of requires the applicant to look at all of these different considerations, burdened areas, site suitability, impacts of project construction and operations. And so it's a nice framework for ensuring a much more expanded and required set of considerations. Next slide, please. For example, we have cases where for clean energy facilities, where a CI is required, and you can see that a CI report was required for all these types of facilities, and CI remedial actions would be required if, in fact, there's a disproportionate adverse effect is identified. So they'll have to propose some kind of remedial actions. For site suitability reports are required for clean energy generation and clean energy storage, and also in cases where there is for transmission and distribution, where it's being established the transmission or distribution lines in a newly established public right-of-way. Next slide, please. And for fossil fuel, CIA reports are once again required for all types of these energy facilities and remedial actions if, in fact, a disproportionate adverse effect is discovered. But the law does not require, and the regulation does not require site suitability for fossil fuel or legacy facilities. Next slide. Okay, now we're going to sort of show, this is our show and tell time here. We're going to show how these CIA reports and site suitability analyses are conducted. Next slide. Okay, so we're looking at a battery energy storage system, clean energy storage facility called Cranberry Point. It was in Carver. It is in Carver. It's been built. And it interconnects to an existing substation. And here this becomes important. We have multiple types of components. For example, we have the actual BESS facility itself, and we have a project substation. We actually have a little interconnection line too. So we have different components which would have different SGAs, or specific geographical areas. For example, the transmission line is a 1/4 mile, the substation's a 1/2 mile radius, and the battery facility is a 1 mile radius. Next slide, please. So the question is, if an applicant took this project and after July 1st of this year, would a site suitability report or a CIA report be required? And the answer is yes. They're both clean energy infrastructure facilities, and the regulation would require them to be these types of analyses to be conducted. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's start with site suitability. We have the first criteria is climate change resilience. And again, this is we use the RMAT model, or the applicant would use the RMAT model to identify if there is coastal surge or if there's riverine flooding. Well, in the case of, this is in Carver, there's no ocean in Carver, and there is no river near this facility. So the RMAT model said that there was no exposure for those two parameters pursuant to the site suitability criteria. However, the RMAT model did show that there was extreme precipitation risks and extreme temperature risks. So while that's not part of the site suitability, that's a good example of how the board may consider those factors outside the realm of site suitability. For carbon sequestration and storage, again, this is the ability of the environment to absorb greenhouse gases. That basically we found the model helps us understand the types of ground cover. In this case, it was developed and undeveloped, as well as the range of carbon dioxide equivalents that could be absorbed per acre. And so what we found was with this kind of a project in this environment that we actually had a moderate impact. And so let's go to the next slide. And this is actually an output. Actually, there's an updated to the site suitability mapping tool that makes this even easier to use. But it's very quick. Basically, we position this facility, and it tells us what in this case, the ecosystem carbon index, or the ability of the environment to absorb carbon dioxide. And so what we find here in this mix of area is that we have a moderate impact. Next slide, please. Okay, then we go to biodiversity. And in this particular area, there were no basically protected areas, endangered species, and a number of the factors that go into calculating biodiversity. There was some slight resources that were picked up by the ecological index. So we do have a small, very small, but real biodiversity index of 0.3. So go to the next slide. And the way we find that, next slide, please, is that, again, just like the ecosystem carbon index, we simply map it. And it gives us a value for us to understand. And again, these are mapped at, for example, biodiversity at 30-meter grid. So, I mean, this is really high-resolution stuff. And so it's really useful to understand what the impacts. It really helps applicants in helping them come up with the locations and siting and routing. Next slide, please. Then we have agricultural resources, which basically look at soils and types of designations of farmland. And what we find is that there is some designated farmland, which we'll show on a map here in a moment. So it comes up with a very low, but a score of a non-zero score of 0.1. Because this is in an area with where the massive viral screen score is very low, far lower than the actionable level, the 75th percentile. There are no social environmental burdens for this area per that tool, the massive viral screen tool. And then finally, what we find is with the site suitability score modifiers, that there was no developmental potential modifier nor social environmental benefits from this project. So in that case, there was no modification of the site suitability score. So that's 0. Next slide, please. Okay, and this shows the agricultural potential. And if you look closely, basically, you'll see the little red star is where the facility is. You'll see that it actually, the very southern tip of it overlaps what is basically a cranberry bog. And so while there was some overlap with an agriculture area, it's a very small overlap. It was just sort of literally the toenail of that overlap. And so we averaged the whole site, and we come up with the low value of 0.1. Next slide, please. So what do we do with this? We then compile them, and it's important that these scores are not added. They are individual scores for each criteria. And we see that there were a lot of fairly low numbers, but still the question is, what do we do with this? How do we interpret this? Next slide, please. And the site suitability guidance provides, and this is for local applications, but it gives the board a general understanding of what the magnitudes mean. And you can see that if it's less than 1, it's a highly suitable site and no minimization mitigation is required. And again, this assumes that avoidance has already occurred. If you're between 1 and 2.5, you're moderately suitable, but there's some impact and some limited mitigation and minimization actions may be required. If you're way up, like greater than 4, it's a very high impact. That's, for example, like when you're going over protected lands, for example. And significant minimization or mitigation would be required. So it's on the sliding scale of low impacts at low number, higher impacts, higher number. Next slide, please. So most criteria had scores less than 1. So that indicated the site is highly suitable. So it was a good decision by the board when it was made a couple of years ago. However, the ecosystem carbon index there were some moderate impacts. And so question is, what kind of minimization or mitigation could you do to address that? Next slide, please. And basically the applicant might come up with with a mitigation hierarchy, and they said avoidance, they might move that southern edge of the property line up about 50 yards or so to basically get off of that cranberry bog. They might minimize the impacts by minimizing pavement in that area because there was a little access road at the very southern part of this facility. Or they might mitigate by composing the ground cover of materials that continue to facilitate or promote carbon sequestration. These are only illustrative examples, and as a shout out, the doer guidance provides excellent examples and ideas for potential minimization and mitigation measures. Next slide, please. Now, for the CIA analysis, what we do is we look at, again, the specific geographical area. And again, there were different components. There was a 1/4 mile for the transmission line. There was a 1/2 mile for the substation. And there was a 1 mile for the facility itself. And we then overlay that on the mass EnviroScreen map. And we see that actually it is in a burdened area. But it's only within one burdened area. It's less, the next burdened area to the south is over 1 mile away. It's a burdened area though, but you might recall that the mass enviro score for this facility was only 7.55, but the actionable level is 75, the 75th percentile. So it's way, it's an order of magnitude below the actionable level. So why is it a burdened area? It's a burdened area because of the income. The mean household income here is like about 62%, whereas relative to the state average. And the criterion for mean household income is 65% or higher is not a burdened area. Less than 65% is a burdened area. So in this case, it's a burdened area because of the median household income. Next slide, please. So we say, okay, well, if it's in a burdened area, then we need to look at what indicators are elevated. And the indicators that are elevated are the ones that are at or greater than the 50th percentile. And these are the about 11, I think there's 11 there, indicators, ozone, age-adjusted premature mortality rate, low birth weight, et cetera, that are all 50 and above. And so those are considered elevated indicators. And it's those that we use as an analysis within that burdened area to determine would the project exacerbate those elevated indicators. Next slide, please. Okay, and so what we did that, and importantly, we did that both for construction as well as operations. So we do it for both phases, those two phases of the project. And what we found was that this project didn't have any exacerbation of those 11 elevated indicators for operations, but for construction, there were 2 of them were in fact exacerbated. One was ozone, and the other was chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder. And why are those? And the question is, well, why would those be exacerbated? The reason is for ozone, the nearest residents are about 400 feet away. And ozone certainly is a secondary pollutant, can be created from NOx and for volatile organic carbon emissions, basically, especially during sunny days and the summertime. So that has a potential for being exacerbated, ozone levels, and COPD for a similar reason, that in fact emissions can exacerbate this disorder, as well as dust dust up from construction activities themselves. So what do we do with that? Well, if there is an exacerbation, a material exacerbation of these elevated indicators, then we have to come up with remedial actions. Next slide, please. So for ozone, we use for all those cases, we use a mitigation hierarchy, and we basically look at, well, how do we avoid it? Well, we could use electric equipment. How do we minimize it? We can basically use ultra low sulfur. We can reduce vehicle idling. And we could also, from a mitigation perspective, I'm sorry, I'm a little nearsighted. I'm going to have to look at this here. Basically, we could use construction equipment with best available technology and properly tune and operate our construction equipment. And basically, the combination of avoidance, minimization, mitigation then results in a reduction in exposure of ozone to nearby residents. Next slide, please. And for COPD, basically, it's quite similar. We can once again to avoid. And again, we always use this mitigation hierarchy. We can then avoid through the use of electric vehicles. We can basically use low sulfur diesel. We could also, because dust is also an issue, we can make sure that we have best practices for wetting agents and for soil and things like that. And again, we can use well-tuned construction equipment and best available technology to mitigate these emissions and these dust as well. And that's what we need to do. And then the report, basically the CIA report, that's what it goes through. It goes through the SGA, what indicators are elevated, which ones are exacerbated, and then what are remedial actions. That's the whole thing. Using these tools, it makes it go it's actually quite straightforward. And the same thing with site suitability and using the site suitability tools and mass EnviroScreen. It kind of facilitates getting this done in a very timely and effective way. And that's it. Mr. Kelleher?
Thank you, Mr. Riley. Alan, you don't need a break yet? Okay. So we will proceed to the comment section. We will now invite comments and questions from the public. Please focus your questions on this proposed regulation. We will not be accepting comment on particular projects, including those projects that are currently under review by the siting board. We will begin with federal, state, and local officials appointed as well as elected officials who wish to be heard. Then we will proceed with members of the commission. What was the name of the commission?
Commission, the Energy Infrastructure Siting.
Commission on Energy Structure Siting and Permitting. And then we will proceed with members of the public who have registered to speak in the order in which they registered. Finally, we will allow anyone else who wishes to speak but did not register in advance. If you are participating remotely and I call upon you to speak, we will move you into the Zoom panel so you can be seen and heard by the Zoom audience as well as those here in the room. For all speakers, please give your name and address if you wish, even if only your town. Spell your name and speak slowly and clearly. Do we have any federal officials present or on Zoom who wish to comment? Do we have any state officials present or on Zoom who wish to comment? Do we have any? We have a couple of people raising their hands. No. Okay. Do we have? I know that do we have any local officials who either present or on Zoom who would wish to comment? So we have a Jeff Weston. Let me just see if any, and do we know the name of the other person?
Lori Degnan. Jeff is moving to the panel.
Great. Mr. Weston is going to the panel. And before we take your comment, Mr. Weston, I'll just mention that the slides that Mr. Riley presented will be posted onto our website, which is the Sightings Board's website entitled EFSB 25-10 Proposed Rulemaking. Mr. Weston, if you're available, please proceed.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for allowing public comments. My name is Jeff Weston. I'm an elected official of the Shutesbury Planning Board. Our hope was that requiring a cumulative impact analysis and a site suitability assessment would provide regulatory protections against negative environmental impacts. I believe that your proposed draft falls way short of this goal. 980 CMR, as it's written, will allow poorly sited projects with large lithium batteries to be built that in order for a census block group to
So,
be...
Mr. Weston, you're breaking up. You were saying that this proposed regulation will allow battery storage projects to be built, and that's where we lost you.
Oh, I'm sorry. In rural... will allow poorly sited
Mr. Weston, perhaps you can turn off your video and that will improve the audio. And when you continue, just start again with where you started with the battery storage projects.
I believe 980 batteries to be built in rural I find the main problem with your draft is that in order for a census block to be burdened, it must receive the indicator I am in. Energy equity is important. However,
so Mr. Weston, you really are breaking up terribly. I don't know if there's anything that you can do on your end. I think it would make sense, certainly, for you to submit your written comments and see if there's something you can do to improve your transmission, and we will probably proceed with the next commenter. And perhaps jumping off and jumping back on. But I think while you're doing that, is it okay if we go with the next commenter?
Please, I'll try a different computer. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Degnan, you are being added to the Zoom panel. So please start whenever you're there.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Lori Degnan, Charlton Planning Board. Am I correct in assuming it looks like you used to have a criteria of being an environmental justice community in order to request a cumulative impact analysis? Am I correct in assuming that has changed so we can request?
Mr. Riley, would you like to answer that?
Sure. Yeah, there is no requirement to be an environmental justice community. And in fact, these requirements is incumbent upon the applicant for certain types of facilities, as we outlined, to conduct a cumulative impact analysis as well as a site suitability analysis and reporting. So no, there is no requirement to be an environmental justice community.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I thought we had to hit that income level.
Yep.
Can the town require it if the applicant does not provide it?
Well, the applicant, yeah, it's a requirement for the applicant to do. So, I mean, if the applicant did not submit a CIA report or a site suitability report, then if it's a local, application, then the city would, or the town would require, for example, the site suitability report. If it came to the board, then the board would require, if there was no CIA or site suitability report, then the board would require it.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Are there any other local officials? Well, Mr. Weston, have you returned? Are there any other local officials who would like to speak? When Mr. Weston returns, we will go back to him. But in the meantime, we will proceed with members of the commission who have signed up. Let's start with Mr. Oh, is there something?
Hi, I'd like to add just a little bit about the questions that Ms. Degnan was asking. There is a provision in the CIA regulations that allow for a petition for a CIA in a non-burdened area. And this provision states that you need to be a key stakeholder to ask for a CIA report, even though you are not a burdened area. So that provision is in there. You can find that at 15.046, parentheses 6. So add a little more information there.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Mr. Long, would you please come introduce yourself?
Thank you very much. I'm Steve Long with the Nature Conservancy in Massachusetts. We're located in Boston. So I just want to thank the level of effort you all have made. It's really great seeing energy. And also I feel like, go ahead. Check 1, 2. There we go. Do you need me to start over because there are folks online? Could they hear me?
Just start over.
Okay. Steve Long with the Nature Conservancy in Massachusetts. We're located in Boston. I just want to thank the level of effort you all have put in. It's fabulous seeing the energy and environmental agencies getting aligned. And it's really great seeing us focus on climate change, affordability, reliability, all in one. The more efficient and equitable process will help in all of those regards. So in reviewing the regulations on CIA and site suitability, I'd like to see more Velcro. I'd like to see more tangible language in the regulations that connect to site suitability. Particularly looking at section 15.10 subsection 11, I'd like to see something spelled out more specifically on the assessment, consideration, and the requirement to apply permit conditions, not just the consideration. I'd also like to see some clarity on if there is a highly unsuitable area, does the board have the right to say no to a permit applicant? And I really like the language in 1511, and I'd like to see that, I'm sorry, the language in 1510, I'd like to see that mirrored in 1511. There's a lot of specificity on the level of due diligence between the regulations and CIA. I'd like to see that same level of due diligence. I think we all aspire to have a goal that there be a nexus with the avoid, minimize, mitigate, and environmental impacts, looking at the environmental function, really seeking a no net loss of ecosystem function, and perhaps a nature positive income, a +1 on the mitigation hierarchy spectrum. We also did like that there was a third-party reviewer in the previous iteration of the regulations and encourage that be inserted back in. And are there areas where site suitability would not be applied? I was a little unclear on that. If there's a neighborhood where CIA is applied, are there places where site suitability would not be applied? That's a question.
You want me?
Mr. Riley.
Okay. Yeah. If you have a situation where, let's see, if you have to do it where there's a new right of way, but if there isn't a new right of way, right? There isn't a new right of way, then you don't have to.
Yeah, an existing right of way. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. How would that apply to a substation? Because I really feel like the substations are the cog that drive the development around them. So it's like the tail that wags the dog. How do we get substations in the site suitability realm in consideration?
I think Ms. Evans, are you wanting to respond?
I can respond partially to that. I'd like to note that there are actually two sets of exemptions for site suitability, and the fact that site suitability under the statute does not apply to fossil fuel facilities. It only applies to the clean energy infrastructure facilities. That's the first thing. The second thing is, as Mr. Riley stated, that for T&D, it only applies to facilities established in newly established public rights of way. There's very specific language in the statute. As far as substations are concerned, if they are in newly established public rights of way, I think that they would be, it would be applicable. But if they are not, and I will say many substations are on private land, so would not fall into that category. I would like to note one other set of exemptions. DOER set up some exemptions in their regulations under 29.00, 225 CMR 29.00. Generally, for smaller facilities, there's actually an exemption for certain types of facilities that are looking to capitalize under the ITC before it goes away. And so our regulations specifically state that those facilities that are exempt under DOER's rules are also exempt under our rules. So we had consistency between the two sets of regulations.
Thank you. And then finally, I think climate resilience should go beyond the RMAT tool and also look at how will a proposed facility exacerbate climate change impacts. Oftentimes with a facility, you have impervious pavement through which water cannot percolate into the ground. How might that exacerbate flooding in a community? So I'd encourage that to be expanded. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any, let's see, are there other members of the commission? Did you say Mr. Oh, well, Conservation Law Foundation. I'm just going in the order that I see them here, but let's, is that okay? We'll start with Conservation Law Foundation. Great. Perfect. Thanks.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Happy Groundhog Day. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this hearing. My name is Adam Reynolds, and I'm a legal fellow with, sorry, I'll slow down. My name is Adam Reynolds, ADAMREYNOLDS, and I'm a legal fellow with the Conservation Law Foundation. I'd just like to briefly provide comments on behalf of CLF. First, I'd like to highlight CLF's appreciation for the staff and the board's work to hold the stakeholder process that has led to these regulations. We commend the board on proposing a set of regulations that meet the 2024 Climate Act's legal requirement to consider the cumulative burdens of pollution on host communities, and also to ensure that applicants avoid, minimize, and mitigate the disproportionate adverse effects of their projects. Importantly, EFSB has developed manageable regulations that applicants can navigate while including community input. and they also promote the build out of a cleaner and more affordable energy future. We'd like to express support and emphasize the importance of recent changes that help to achieve these aims. One example is the implementation of a procedure through which people living in areas that are not designated as burdened by the Mass EnviroScreen score are able to petition to have the EFSB conduct a cumulative impact, or the applicant conduct a cumulative impact analysis that's considered by the board. This, I think, was mentioned earlier, and we think it's an important process that will ensure that all host communities experiencing elevated burdens can work with the EFSB to apply the existing CIA to the projects that they host. We'd also support the changes that will apply a more detailed analysis of all indicators to legacy facilities, which have historically been the source of significant burdens in host communities. This change brings the regulation into alignment with the statutory requirement that the board's decision gives special consideration to the cumulative impacts stemming from greenhouse gases and other pollution known to have negative health impacts and other disproportionate effects. And then lastly, I also want to highlight our support for the board's decision to include a site suitability analysis alongside the CIA. The board's changes to the purpose and scope of the regulation that will clarify the projects that are covered, and the inclusion of regular updates to the data that's used in the Mass EnviroScreen tool. In addition to these positive developments, there are a few places where CLF requests the EFSB adjust the proposal to clarify and streamline the regulation while ensuring that it also fulfills the statutory obligation by expanding the CIA to include reliable data on burdens that are not necessarily captured by Mass EnviroScreen. I think we've noted before how that might be able to work with the process where host communities provide evidence to support a cumulative impact analysis if they aren't necessarily identified by the Mass EnviroScreen. And then two, by updating the radial distances for project types to more accurately reflect their impacts. One place we think this might be helpful is for gas pipelines. I know we talked about some of the safety considerations around other facilities earlier, but that's one that we'll highlight in our written comments. And then also to make sure that every type of project that might go before the EFSB has a specified radial distance. There isn't any gap there in the types of projects when a CIA is conducted, so we know what those radial distances would be. The EFSB could also make adjustments by ensuring that the commitments made through the CIA process are incorporated into permits so that they become enforceable. By providing more guidance and tools ahead of the July 1 implementation to support applicants when they conduct a CIA. We think this is especially true with respect to the quantitative assessment of disproportionate adverse effects as applicants are considering how to mitigate, avoid, or minimize those. And then by clarifying that the EFSB's procedure for incorporating the CIA into decision-making, and we'll include some written comments on that. And then finally, by tracking and collecting data to inform improvements, the regulation that will occur during the 5-year window. I want to close, and then I have one question afterwards, but I just want to close by again thanking the staff and the board for their hard work on this really essential element of the new siting reforms. We know it's been a difficult process, and we really look forward to working with you to make sure it's successful in the coming years. So we'll submit the rest of our written comments with more detail by the February 13th deadline. And if I can just ask one question. As we were going through the presentation earlier, the question is just when figuring out how applicants propose measures to respond to the elevated indicators that are creating disproportionate adverse effects. In some cases, I think it's obvious where there's maybe a way to create that solution, but in some cases, we're wondering if there's any quantitative assessment or tools that the board expects to work with applicants on to figure out what the impacts on a specific indicator are going to be from a specific project. If you're looking at something like air pollution or ozone, and if there's any modeling that the board expects to have applicants do or to provide tools that would help applicants.
Mr. Riley, would you like to respond?
Thank you. Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for your comments, excellent comments. We have left it open for the reason as far as what specific quantitative measures or tools are used, for the specific reason that there are a lot of different situations, and we want the applicants to feel free to propose what they think is appropriate. If the board, and one thing I didn't say, but in the regulation, if the board feels that there is insufficient evidence or modeling or what have you. I mean, first of all, there are definitely quantitative techniques to ensure that there is a kind of quantitative mitigation. that's well published in the literature. But more importantly, if the board feels that there's insufficient evidence to back up a proposed remedial action, then the board can submit, requests for information requests to and discuss that further with the applicant. But because it's a wide range of types of impacts, so we want the applicant to feel that they can provide what they think is right, then we'll follow up if we have to.
Okay, that's very helpful, and thank you for conducting the sort of explaining how this process will work. I think
Sure.
we're going to look through that, and maybe we'll provide some additional comments. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Mr. Weston, I understand that you have returned.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Thanks so much for taking me back. I'll start from the beginning. Our hope was that requiring a cumulative impact analysis and a site suitability assessment would provide regulatory protections against negative environmental impacts. I believe that your proposed draft falls way short of this. 980 CMR, as it's written, will allow poorly sited projects with large lithium batteries to be built on rural forested Massachusetts under the guise of clean energy development. The main problem with your draft is that in order for a census block group to be burdened, it must receive a mass environment score of 75 or greater. The indicators used by MES barely include any environmental impacts as required in statute. Energy equity is important. However, a brownfield does not have the same value as the forest. A report published on October 3rd of 2023 by the scientists of Mass Audubon and the Thompson Lab Forest emphasized the importance of protecting our forests. There are only two indicators that seem somewhat relevant to rural forested communities. These indicators do not seem to be weighted, which means that the number of indicators directly impacts the score of the MES screening. The MES standards as they are currently written do not include an environmentally oriented cumulative impact, which would help to protect our valuable and irreplaceable forests. As a result, most rural areas cannot be determined burdened based on the indicators that were chosen in the current MES scoring. Thus, sightings in rural communities such as ours in Shrewsbury will be extremely vulnerable because cumulative impact analysis reviews will not be required. This is an absolutely fatal flaw in your report. We make up part of the Quabbin watershed, which means that we have both surface and groundwater flowing from our town into the Quabbin. Our land, which is 90% forested, helps to clean and protect the water used by 3 million people in the greater metropolitan Boston area, perhaps even the water on your tables right now in South Station. Our great concern is that the contamination of our groundwater or the Quabbin or Atkins reservoirs, which by the way serves our flagship university in Amherst, caused by lithium-ion fire in a poorly sited project. It is essential, I believe, that your MES scoring includes a greater emphasis on the environmental and drinking water impact on site suitability. It now does not. We need your help so we can continue to protect the purity of our town aquifers, as well as the essential water from the Atkins and the Quabbin reservoirs, which are essential for Boston. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weston. Does anyone want to respond? Or the next, Ms. Paradis.
Hello, can you hear me? Great.
Yes.
My name is Olivia Paradis, Paradis, and I work at National Grid at the Siting Strategy team. First, thank you all for the opportunity to speak today, and thank you to EFSB, OEJE, and EEA staff for all their hard work on the CIA regulations, template, and Mass EnviroScreen tool. First, I'd like to start with a few comments on the Mass EnviroScreen tool itself. National Grid supports the use of a Commonwealth-owned tool for determining whether an area is unduly burdened. This tool is fundamental for determining which communities are considered burdened areas and then which indicators require further analysis. It's important that the underlying data in this tool and the data handling steps are both accurate and transparent to stakeholders and applicants. We have been previewing the tool and the indicator data and have identified some lingering data issues that would benefit from additional QA/QC. We'd love to flag these directly with the MES implementation team and are hoping for clarity on what the best way is to go about that, particularly after the comment period is over. Due to the nature of percentile scoring, any change to the underlying data may result in a different MES score and also has the potential to shift which census block groups are classified as burdened and which are not. Thus, the data are really important here. National Grid requests clarification on which agency is going to be maintaining the tool moving forward, and also what cadence we might expect refinements to both the data and the tool itself. We'd like to propose the tool and the underlying data are updated every 2 years or on some fixed basis that can be communicated to the applicants. There's some additional tool functionality, for example, the ability to export data from MES that we believe would really reduce costs to our customers by reducing consultant expenses and compiling the CIA report, and a few other ways that we can add some additional tool functionality that would be beneficial here. And our written comments will expand on this a bit more. Next, turning to the CIA report template. National Grid is currently running a previously permitted project through the Mass EnviroScreen tool and the CIA template to understand the process better for future 69T projects and also to highlight any potential areas for improvement. There was a discussion at the last board meeting that running the tool and the CIA report template might be a plug and play exercise for the applicants. And in our experience working through the process up until now with a previously permitted project, there is a lot of data compilation required. And it might result in a report that's cumbersome, even with a limited number of burdened areas. We believe there are opportunities to streamline the report and the template to make the process both more efficient for applicants and easier to digest for our stakeholders. For example, there's an opportunity to consolidate certain tables in the CIA report template, which we think will be really helpful. We'll share additional recommendations in our written comments in the hopes of ultimately generating a CIA report that addresses all of the technical pieces and streamlines the analysis and allows us to effectively communicate with all of our stakeholders. Thank you so much to all the staff who've worked so hard on this, and we look forward to supporting this effort as it continues.
Thank you. Who's here? Oh,
Yes,
Saina. Would you like to respond?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Saina Mashmasarmi, and my name is Saina Mashmasarmi. Last name is spelled Mashmasarmi, Syenna. And I'm joining from the Office of Environmental Justice and Equity to respond to some of the questions around the Mass EnviroScreen and the data used within the tool. We are currently working with our consultant on the project, Dr. Marcus Luna, alongside our EEA GIS team to ensure that the data is both accurate and being maintained throughout the development of the tool itself. Any questions or comments regarding the data within the tool can be directed to our ej.inquiries@mass.gov email address, ej.inquiries@mass.gov email address. And as far as the additional functionality of the tool or additional functionalities of the tool, the draft version, which is available online currently, will continue to be updated to incorporate additional functions, including the ability to export the data that is being used in the tool, alongside other things which will be rolled out in the coming weeks. And yes, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Matthews, would you like to speak as well? Okay. Pretty good. Denise Bartone. You know, is she?
Yeah.
No, I know. So actually, let's start with Mr. Henderson. I apologize. Just going in the order on the list. So John Henderson, are you present on Zoom? Okay. So now Kate O'Connor, please.
Hello, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I am. We are. Thank you.
Great. I'm just going to quickly change my background so that I can share some maps with you. I am speaking on behalf of myself and Trees as a Public Good. And we wanted to point out that the cumulative impacts analysis has no criteria whatsoever for forest contribution to provide and produce clean water. So the map that's behind me right now is a map of our region's, our regional area's ability to produce clean water. And I'm going to remove my face for a moment so you can look at the map. And I hope you can pin it so that you can see that these are the areas in our region that are at 100% capacity to produce clean water. And what you're looking at is the areas in New England, including the Adirondack State Park, the Catskills Preserves, some national forests in Vermont and New Hampshire. And these are the only places in New England that are at 100% capacity to produce clean water. And the reason that these particular areas are the only places in New England, are because of removing forests. So the areas that are at 73% include the Quabbin Reservoir. So right now you can see that the Quabbin Reservoir shows up at 73% ability to produce clean water. So we've already degraded our entire state's ability to produce clean water. At 75%, the Quabbin disappears. So our main reservoir for Boston doesn't even have a 75% ability to produce clean water. So I want to now go down into the, go into the, I believe I have the areas that are at 100% capacity to produce clean water have wildland forests. They are permanently protected. And we don't have any forests in Massachusetts that have the same designation to produce clean water for our watersheds. So the fact that the cumulative impacts analysis has absolutely no criteria for forest contribution to the ability to produce clean water. There's no assessment of the regional availability of water to deal with fires that may occur at energy sites, which for areas in the western part of Massachusetts, even our municipal water is compromised in our ability to fight fires. We had a recent fire in Amherst where the town of Amherst didn't have enough water. the public water supply was not adequate to fight a fire, and there were tankers coming from neighboring towns to help fight that fire. So the fact that we've already degraded our ability to produce clean water, and that includes quantity as well as quality. Quantity of clean water is produced by wild forests, non-degraded forests. So we do not have the regional ability in areas where most of the residents, like myself, I live in West Hampton, we're all on wells. We have no municipal water. So our ability to fight fires, and particularly if you're siting energy facilities in our community, we are dealing with tanker trucks to fight those fires. And our capacity is, to site a lot of those facilities in our towns is unreasonable. The other risks of fighting fires are, since we don't have the available water supplies to easily fight fires, the contamination of foams to fight fires puts our watersheds at risk. The stormwater impacts due to slopes and increased impervious areas are not included in the cumulative impacts analysis at all. So the goal of these regulations are to help speed up siting, and we fully support solar. We believe it should be sited, and there should be more weight given to the already built environment. And the areas where solar should be built should be given more factors, more weight to be able to allow companies to have quicker siting in those areas. However, with the way that the criteria is right now, the educated towns who understand the impacts to our water supplies by siting solar, by cutting down forests, are going to fight back. We are going to file lawsuits, and that is going to slow the process down, because water is critical. If my well runs dry, I don't have any recourse. In an area with a municipal water supply, you have more options. In my area, where, are we all going to be forced to build cisterns to try to store water? I mean, the impact on our water supply is huge. And especially since Massachusetts already, the area in my town only is at 73% ability to produce clean water. And there are many, many watersheds in Massachusetts that are far below 73%, most of the state. The map that I showed earlier of the 73% is a small portion of the state that actually has a non-degraded watershed. Here are the non-degraded watersheds in Massachusetts. And you'll see that most of Massachusetts doesn't even have the ability, doesn't have better than 73%, including Boston's water supply. So that if you start cutting those forests down in Shutesbury that supply Boston's water supply, you are going to run out of water. This summer, we had 3 months of drought, and the water level in the Quabbin dropped by 8.9%. So it came down from the 90th percentiles into the low 80s. It's now around 81%. Below 80% is drought conditions. So you are, by not taking water into consideration in the siting suitability, you are threatening your own Boston water supply, because the watershed are supplied by the forests. And the areas that are at 100% capacity to produce clean water, as I showed you before, are the forever wild forests of the Catskills, the Adirondacks, and the national forests in New Hampshire and New Hampshire and Vermont. And if we don't pay attention to this, if we just go ahead and cite energy infrastructure willy-nilly and keep cutting down forests, we are going to create a water crisis that will overshadow the energy crisis. The enormity is incredible. We are already in drought conditions in parts of the state, and we can't afford to continue to degrade our forests. The impacts on our water is, this is just too great. It's ecological suicide. So I hope that you take this into consideration, how important this criteria needs to be added. And we need to protect our forests because this is our water. These maps and the information that I provide are from the USDA Forest Service, Forest to Faucets reports, and we'll be submitting the links and more information. We'll provide more maps, including the map of, which I didn't have prepared, but the map of the Catskill watershed. They have a watershed map that very clearly shows the wildlands and wild forests, and it's an exact match for the ability to produce clean water map. The Catskill map exactly mirrors the wild forest map, where the ability to produce clean water is at 100%, is where the forests have been left alone. They're not logged, they don't have extensive roads, they're not degraded. And we need our water more than we need electricity.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connor. Alan, are you saying that you need a break? I think we have one more commenter. So let's, and either we'll finish or we'll take a break. Ms. Bartone?
Hi, everyone. I'm Denise Bartone. I'm Director of Environmental Permitting at Eversource Energy. And thank you for the opportunity to provide brief comments this afternoon. And we will follow up with detailed written comments by the February 13th deadline. We appreciate the substantial work EEA, OEJE, and the EFSB have dedicated to developing draft rules and guidance for the cumulative impact analysis, as well as the significant time and resources invested in creating the Mass EnviroScreen tool. The company supports having an online tool that's user-friendly, that's accessible to all parties, including the general public, and provides an efficient and transparent process. The Mass EnviroScreen tool, or MES, is a key procedural component for requiring a cumulative impact analysis for proposed projects by defining the burden areas, identifying the nexus between burden areas and a project's specific geographic area, and providing the underlying data to conduct the CIA. The MES has been presented as the authoritative and objective tool for determining burden areas in the Commonwealth. It is essential that the state remains responsible for regularly maintaining and updating the underlying data, as well as owning the results produced by the tool. A state-level process should be created to establish how stakeholders can request updates or refinements to the tool, and what agency or agencies would be responsible for managing it. We recognize the need for such a process to ensure the tool is current and the results are accurate as possible. At the same time, we have significant concerns regarding the proposed petition process that would allow a key stakeholder to request a CIA for a census block group that is not designated as a burdened area, specifically 980 CMR 15.4 for N6. Allowing ad hoc petitions to override MES results introduces subjectivity, invites potential delays during the completeness determination timeline, and imposes significant costs and schedule burdens, all of which are inconsistent with the purpose of the tool and the Climate Act. If data is missing or MES fails to capture a burden, the appropriate remedy is for stakeholders to petition for state-level revisions or updates to the tool, outside of specific project filings. This would maintain fairness, objectivity, and alignment with the statute, while furthering the objective that the MES remains current and credible. We fully support the goal of ensuring accurate and equitable review. However, as proposed, the petition process is not the right mechanism. It introduces uncertainty, inequity, and inefficiency, and it undermines the objective statewide framework that the MES was built to provide. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and we look forward to collaborating with the agencies to refine the CIA regulations.
Thank you very much. Are there any other people who would like to speak? If we could go to the slide with the timeline, please. I think it's slide 41. Oh, is there another speaker? So we take a break. I do want to honor that, but well, let's see. Is there anyone besides Aaron Smith who would like to speak? We don't think so. Is that right? All right. Let's hear from Ms. Smith, please.
Hi, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Erin Smith, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Environmental League of Massachusetts, or ELM. ELM strongly supports the new cumulative impact analysis regulations and appreciates the board's leadership in strengthening environmental justice protections. We want to highlight two important improvements that we strongly endorse. First, we commend the decision to allow communities to petition for a cumulative impact analysis. This is a meaningful step towards empowering communities to raise concerns when they are experiencing overlapping environmental and public health stressors. Second, we appreciate that the regulations require legacy fossil fuel facilities to assess all 30 cumulative impact indicators. This is long overdue. Communities that have hosted polluting infrastructure for decades deserve a full accounting of how new or modified projects interact with existing harms. ELM urges the board to revisit one provision in the regulations, the radial distance requirements, particularly for battery energy storage projects. As proposed, battery storage and onshore wind facilities are assigned a 1 mile specific geographic area, the same distance that is applied to certain fossil fuel facilities such as liquefied natural gas, as well as gas compressor stations. Meanwhile, natural gas pipelines are assigned only a 1/2 mile radius, with solar farms and substations also set at 1/2 mile. This distinction is not supported by the data. Battery storage systems are essential for grid reliability, renewable energy integration, lower electricity costs, and emissions reduction. Available evidence shows that fire and water incidents are extremely rare and declining, even as deployments are accelerating. In 2025, there were 12 battery storage failure incidents worldwide, of which only 6 were in the United States and none were in Massachusetts. For onshore wind turbines, no major safety incidents have been reported for host communities. By contrast, fossil fuel infrastructure poses well-documented and ongoing safety risks. In 2024 alone, the most recent year data was available, there were 263 significant pipeline incidents in the United States that involved a fatality, injury, fire, explosion, or major oil spill, according to the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. Many here in Massachusetts remember the 2018 Merrimack Valley gas explosion, which killed 1 person, injured 24 people, and displaced thousands of others. When we weigh these relative risks and benefits, it does not make sense for battery storage to be regulated more stringently than natural gas, or for onshore wind to be regulated more stringently than natural gas, particularly when the state fire code already incorporates some of the most stringent battery safety standards in the US, and where storage projects are required to obtain a permit from the fire department to install and operate. Given these realities, ELM recommends that battery energy storage and onshore wind facilities be assigned a 1/2 mile radius, which is consistent with how the regulations treat solar energy and substations in the draft. This adjustment would preserve strong community engagement and environmental justice protections, while ensuring that the CIA framework is risk-based, data-driven, and aligned with Massachusetts' clean energy and climate goals. Thank you for the opportunity to comment, and we appreciate the board's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your comments today. We welcome written comments. If you can put up slide 41. We welcome written comments through February 13 at 5 p.m. by 5 p.m. We will be posting videos of this public comment hearing online at the Siting Board's YouTube channel, and you will be able to find the slide presentation on the Siting Board's webpage entitled EFSB-10-Proposed Rulemaking. We will host another public comment hearing on the proposed CIA regulation this evening at 6 p.m. Thank you all for coming. Off the record.
Is he done?